The first thing Claire said was, "Daniel and I are getting married." The second thing I noticed was the date printed at the top of the cafe receipt, March 18. My fingers tightened around the paper until it bent between them. Across the table, Claire Whitmore sat perfectly still in a cream-colored coat. Her blonde hair was pinned behind one ear, revealing the small pearl earrings I had given her for her 25th birthday. Daniel sat beside her instead of beside me. That detail had mattered the first time back then. I had stared at the empty chair next to mine and understood that the decision had already been made before either of them opened their mouths. Now I stared at the date again, March 18, 16 months before the night I died on a rain-slick road outside Tacoma. 10 weeks before the wedding I had tried to stop. 4 days before I had rejected the best job offer of my career because Daniel told me Hearthline could not survive without me. "Nora," Claire whispered. I lifted my eyes. Daniel looked older than 31 when he was nervous. A vertical line appeared between his eyebrows, and he rubbed the edge of his watchband with his thumb. He had done that in our kitchen after missing payroll. He had done it outside his mother's rehabilitation center when the billing coordinator explained that insurance would no longer cover her private room. He had done it the night I found Claire's silk scarf under the passenger seat of his car. In my first life, I had screamed before either of them finished explaining. I had thrown my coffee. It had splashed across Daniel's shirt and Claire's coat. Everyone in the cafe had turned to look at us while I demanded dates, details, and reasons. Then I had spent months proving exactly how much pain a humiliated woman could cause herself while trying to punish two people who had already chosen each other. This time I set the receipt down. "When did it start?" I asked. Daniel's shoulders loosened slightly, as though my calm voice meant the worst had passed. "It's complicated. It usually is when..." Claire looked at him. Daniel looked at the window. "December," he said. 3 months in my first life. He had told me it had happened only once in February. Claire had repeated the lie because they believed a shorter betrayal would sound more forgivable. I nodded. "Before or after the Whitmore investment discussions began?" Claire's face changed. That was my answer. "Nora, this isn't about the company," she said. "Then the question should be easy." Daniel leaned toward me. "Hearthline has nothing to do with what happened between us." I almost laughed. For 6 years, nothing in our relationship had existed outside Hearthline. Our vacations had been built around investor meetings. Our dinners had been interrupted by scheduling failures. Our shared apartment had contained more company equipment than furniture. When Daniel's first operations manager quit, I had stepped in for a few weeks. 2 years later, I was still writing risk protocols, revising vendor contracts, and answering emergency calls at 2 in the morning without a title, equity, or health insurance. Daniel called it building our future. I had called it love. "Are you already engaged?" I asked. Claire's left hand was hidden beneath the table. Slowly, she placed it on top. The diamond was elegant and old-fashioned. It had belonged to her grandmother. I recognized it from the summers we spent at the Whitmore family house on Bainbridge Island. "We didn't want you to hear it from someone else," she said. "How considerate." Her mouth tightened. Daniel's expression hardened. "We knew you'd be hurt." Hurt isn't the same as surprised. That landed harder than I expected. Claire looked down. Daniel sat back. A phone vibrated inside my bag. For one breath, I was afraid it would not be there. Perhaps the date was a coincidence. Perhaps my memories were the final confusion of a dying brain. Perhaps I had invented the wet pavement, the guardrail, the cold filling my lungs while an ambulance siren grew louder and then disappeared. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. The screen lit. Meridian Systems. Formal employment offer. My pulse stumbled. The same subject line, the same sender, the same position I had turned down in my first life. Senior program lead, trust and operations. A salary almost twice what Daniel had ever paid me. If the irregular transfers he called consulting fees could be described as pay. A relocation allowance I would not need because the position was based in Seattle. Full benefits, a future with my own name on it. Daniel noticed the logo at the top of the email. "What's that?" "An offer." "From Meridian?" Claire asked too quickly. I looked at her. A faint flush climbed her throat. Daniel leaned closer. "You applied there months ago?" "You never told me." "I told you I was considering other positions. You said we'd discuss it after the funding round." "You can't start a new job in the middle of everything happening at Hearthline." There it was, not "please don't leave me," not even "I'm sorry." His first instinct was still to calculate the effect of my departure on his company. Claire stared at him. For a second, she seemed embarrassed on my behalf. Daniel continued. "We need to separate the personal situation from the business. The Whitmore partnership could change everything, but the next 10 weeks are critical." "The next 10 weeks," I repeated. Until your wedding, he exhaled sharply. That isn't what I meant. It was exactly what he meant. He planned to replace me in his bed while keeping me in his operations meetings. In my first life, I had stayed, not gracefully, not quietly, but I had stayed long enough to complete the investor package because I was terrified Hearthline would fail and Daniel would blame me. Then I had discovered my risk report had been altered. When I objected, he accused me of stealing company documents. Claire's father had used his influence to keep the dispute quiet. Quiet for them, at least for me it had meant withdrawn interviews, unanswered emails, and former colleagues who suddenly remembered other obligations when I called. I opened the Meridian offer. At the bottom were 2 buttons: accept offer, request discussion. My thumb hovered over the first. Nora, Daniel said, lowering his voice, don't make a career decision while you're emotional. I looked at the man I had once believed knew me better than anyone. He did know me. That was why he understood which words would make me doubt myself. I pressed accept offer. A confirmation screen appeared. Claire inhaled softly. Daniel stared at my phone. What did you just do? I accepted. You can't. I already did. We have active projects under your name. I'll prepare a termination notice for my consulting agreement. His face went still. Claire reached toward me but stopped before touching my hand. You don't have to decide everything today. You did. That's not fair. No, I said. It isn't. Silence spread across the table around us. The cafe continued as if 3 lives had not just split apart. A milk steamer hissed behind the counter. Someone laughed near the door. A child dropped a spoon. Daniel lowered his voice. You're punishing the company? No, I'm ending a professional arrangement after discovering that its founder has been having an affair with my closest friend. You know how much pressure I've been under. I do. My mother's care costs $12,000 a month. I know. The Whitmore account could secure us for years. I know that too. The desperation in his face was real. That was what had confused me before. I thought a person could not betray me and also be genuinely afraid. I thought one truth had to erase the other. It did not. Daniel loved his mother. He was terrified of poverty. He had also lied to me for 3 months and planned to keep using my labor after marrying someone else. All of those things could be true. I'm not asking you to understand what happened with Claire, he said. I'm asking you not to destroy 5 years of work because our relationship ended. I won't destroy Hearthline. Relief flickered across his face. I'm simply going to stop holding it together. His relief vanished. I stood and pulled on my coat. Daniel stood too. You have company files on your personal laptop. I have consulting work product and correspondence. I'll ask an attorney what must be returned. An attorney? Claire closed her eyes briefly. I slipped my phone into my bag. You're marrying a Whitmore. I assumed we were all using professionals now. Daniel stepped into my path. Nora, listen to me. You can leave me if that's what you want, but you cannot take Hearthline's work with you. I met his eyes. Then let the lawyers decide what was ever yours. I walked around him. Outside, Seattle rain misted the windows and silvered the pavement. The air felt colder than it should have. I had imagined this moment countless times after my first life collapsed. I thought being given another chance would feel triumphant. It did not. My chest hurt. My hand shook. I wanted to turn around and demand that Claire explain how she could sit across from me wearing earrings I had given her while announcing she would marry the man I loved. Instead, I kept walking. At the corner, my phone rang. An unfamiliar Seattle number appeared on the screen. I answered. Is this Nora Bennett? Yes. This is Adrian Shaw from Meridian Systems. I received your acceptance notification. His voice was low and even. I remembered it from the final interview. Careful. Without sounding cold. I hope the timing isn't inconvenient, he continued. Our system sent the confirmation before I had a chance to call. It's fine. There was a pause. You sound like it might not be fine. I nearly told him everything. Instead, I said, it's been an unusual morning. Do you need to move your start date? The offer listed April 6. In my first life, Daniel had convinced me that 3 weeks was not enough time to transition Hearthline's projects. I had requested a delay then. Another Meridian eventually withdrew the offer. No, I said. April 6th works. Good. Human Resources will send your background forms this afternoon. I'll be your integration contact, but Marisol Chun will be your direct manager. Thank you. And Ms. Bennett? Yes. Accepting a job doesn't require an apology. I stopped beneath a dripping awning. Had I apologized? Maybe he had heard it hiding inside my voice. I'll remember that, I said. After the call ended, I looked back through the cafe. Window. Daniel and Claire were still at the table. Daniel was speaking urgently. Claire was staring in my direction. For most of my adult life, the two people behind that glass had been the center of my world. I waited for the urge to go back. It came, then it passed. I turned toward home. Daniel had already arrived at the apartment by the time I returned. His car was parked crookedly near the curb, one tire touching the painted line. He only parked like that when he was angry enough to forget. Appearances. I stood in the lobby for several seconds before taking the elevator upstairs. The apartment had been ours for 4 years, but very little inside it belonged entirely to me. Daniel had chosen the leather couch because investors sometimes visited. Claire had helped us select the dining table. Hearthline had paid for the second bedroom to be converted into a home office. Although I had furnished half of it myself, my life had become a collection of shared decisions. Daniel was waiting in the kitchen. You called a lawyer? I'm going to. You said that to scare me? No. He paced once toward the windows and back. Claire thinks we should give you a few days. How generous of her. Can you stop doing that? Doing what? Making every sentence sound like an accusation. I set my bag on the counter. You've been sleeping with my best friend since December. Most of my sentences are going to sound accusatory for a while. His jaw tightened. For a moment, his anger slipped, revealing exhaustion. I never planned for this to happen. Which part? You know what I mean. I don't. I didn't wake up one morning and decide to hurt you. No, you made the decision gradually. That doesn't improve it. Daniel rubbed both hands over his face. My mother had another assessment in November. They wanted to move her to a lower care facility. She panicked. Claire helped me find a private place through one of the Whitmore healthcare partners. I had known about the facility. Change. I had spent 2 weeks comparing care ratings, transportation access, and staffing ratios. Daniel had told me an investor contact found the final placement. Claire had been the investor contact. She was there, he said. You were always working for your company. I know. Do you? That's not what I meant. It was strange hearing him struggle in my first life. I had not allowed him to finish a single explanation. I had filled every silence with rage because rage felt stronger than grief. Now I let the silence remain. Daniel looked at me as if my restraint frightened him more than shouting would have. I was drowning, he said. Claire understood what that felt like. And I didn't. You tried to fix everything. I thought that was what you needed. Sometimes I needed you to believe I could handle it. I almost told him I had believed that for years. Instead, I remembered the altered report, the forged signature block, and the legal letter that had described me as a vindictive former partner attempting to sabotage a company she no longer controlled. Where are the consulting agreements? I asked, his face closed. In the office. I need my copy. You have copies. I want the executed version and all amendments. This is exactly what I mean. You turn everything into a process. Processes are useful when trust is gone. He stepped closer. Are you planning to sue me? I'm planning to understand what belongs to whom. Hearthline paid you. Not consistently. We were a startup. I was still a contractor. You were my partner. The word struck me harder than I expected. I had wanted him to call me that for years, not only in private when we were alone and exhausted and he needed reassurance. I had wanted it in board meetings, on the company website, in equity documents. He had always said the paperwork could wait. Now he used the word because it helped him. I was your girlfriend, I said. When the work needed to be free, I was your partner. When ownership mattered, I was a consultant. That's not fair. You should get used to hearing that. I went to the bedroom and pulled a suitcase from the closet. Daniel followed me. What are you doing? Packing. This is your home. Not anymore. You don't have to move today. I do. I started with clothes, work suits, jeans, sweaters, running shoes. I left the blue dress he had bought for our anniversary because I could not remember whether he had chosen it or Claire had. Daniel stood in the doorway while I packed. Where will you go? My mother's tonight. I'll find a place before I start at Meridian. So you're really taking the job? Yes. Hearthline's funding presentation is next Friday. I won't be attending. You built half the operating model. Then you should have considered that before deciding I was replaceable everywhere except at work. He flinched. I moved to the bathroom, gathered my toiletries, then returned to the home office. 2 laptops sat on the desk. One belonged to Hearthline, the other was mine. I left the company laptop untouched. From the filing cabinet, I removed a folder containing my consulting agreement, invoices, tax records, and copies of project statements. I did not open any Hearthline drawers. I did not connect a drive or download anything from company systems. In my first life, Daniel had accused me of stealing data because I had accessed the company server after he revoked my permissions. I had only been trying to retrieve my own reports this time. I would not give him that opportunity. I need your access credentials, he said. I'll send a list of accounts tied to my work email. You can reset them. You're the administrator on 2 vendor systems. I'll transfer access in writing after I receive confirmation that my outstanding invoices are being reviewed. His expression sharpened. You're holding operations hostage. No, I'm documenting a transition. You learned that language from Meridian. I learned it while keeping your company alive. I closed my laptop and slid it into its case. Daniel watched every movement. You won't actually leave me to deal with this alone. There was no arrogance in his voice, only certainty. He knew the version of me who stayed after broken promises, the woman who corrected contracts at midnight after spending the evening crying in the bathroom, the woman who believed leaving during a crisis proved she had never truly loved him. I almost felt sorry for him. I already have, I said. My mother answered on the 3rd ring. Nora, is everything all right? No. That single honest word silenced her. I need somewhere to stay for a few nights. Of course, what happened? I'll tell you when I get there. Daniel turned away as I made arrangements. By the time I carried my suitcase to the front door, he had returned to the kitchen. He did not offer to help. I was relieved. Claire arrived as I was loading the suitcase into my car. She stepped out of a dark SUV, still wearing the cream coat. She had removed my pearl earrings. Nora, please wait. I kept my hand on the trunk. Daniel called you. He's upset. So am I. I know. No, Claire, you know that I should be upset. That's different. She stopped a few feet away. Up close, she looked tired. There were faint shadows beneath her eyes that expensive concealer had not hidden. I never wanted to take your life, she said. You're wearing his ring. I love him. I believed her. That was one of the ugliest parts. If she had used him for entertainment, I could have dismissed everything between them as selfishness, but Claire's hands trembled when she said she loved him. Then marry him, I said. Her eyes widened. You don't mean that. I do. You're not going to tell my father, no, or contact the investors, no. She looked almost frightened by the answer. What are you going to do? Go to work, Nora? I'm not going to stop your wedding. Her shoulders dropped, but I was not finished. I'm also not going to protect Daniel's company, sign anything retroactively, or pretend your relationship began after mine ended. I'm not asking you to lie. Not yet. Pain moved across her face. She reached into her bag and pulled out a key, the spare key to her apartment. We had exchanged keys at 23 after I found her crying on a bathroom floor during one of her father's political fundraisers. She had called me because she did not trust anyone else to see her panic. I removed her key from my ring and placed it in her palm. Then I held out my hand. Slowly, she gave me mine. That exchange hurt more than Daniel's confession. 17 years of friendship ended with 2 small pieces of metal. I hope Meridian is good for you, she whispered. I looked at her sharply. How do you know it's Meridian? Claire went still. Daniel told me. He only saw the logo. That was enough. It was possible it was not convincing. Before I could question her, my phone rang again. A woman introduced herself as Leah Grant. I had left a message with her office from the cafe restroom. She offered a consultation that afternoon. I have to go, I told Claire. Nora, I'm sorry. I closed the trunk. I know. At Leah's office, the walls were lined with filing cabinets rather than decorative books. She wore a charcoal suit and wrote on yellow adhesive notes while I spoke. She did not interrupt when my voice broke. She did not offer opinions about Daniel or Claire. When I finished, she placed 3 notes in a row. First, relationship betrayal is not a legal category. We keep it separate. I nodded. Second, you appear to have been engaged as an independent contractor. That classification may or may not have been correct, but we don't need to solve that today. She pointed to the 3rd note. Third, the agreement you brought says specified work product transfers only upon full payment of the applicable invoice. Hearthline owes me 4 months. Then ownership may not have transferred for work associated with those invoices. Relief and fear arrived together. I don't want to take the company's systems. Good, don't access anything you are not currently authorized to access. Don't delete anything. Don't copy company databases. Preserve the material already on your personal device and let me review it. What about my original reports? If they were created under the consulting agreement, we examine the statements of work and payment history. Evidence is not the same as property you may exploit commercially. She wrote another note. We are not proving Daniel is a bad man, we are determining which documents are real and who owns what. The sentence settled me. Leah asked me to forward the agreements, invoices, and relevant correspondence to an encrypted portal. She would send Hearthline a notice instructing them to preserve records and route communications through counsel. That evening at my mother's house, I completed my Meridian background forms at the dining table. Ruth made tea and watched me from the kitchen. You're ending 6 years without even trying to talk it through, she asked. They're getting married. People say things during emotional situations. They booked a venue. Her face fell. Oh, I signed the final form. A message from Adrian appeared in the onboarding portal. One signature page is incomplete. I've returned it rather than completing the field on your behalf. Take whatever time you need. I corrected the form. Then I noticed a line in the recruitment record, referral source, confidential industry recommendation, initials CW. My skin went cold. CW Claire Whitmore. Before I could decide whether it meant anything, Leah called. I reviewed the documents you uploaded, she said. And there's a problem. I gripped the phone. What kind? Hearthline recently circulated a compliance report bearing your name. The version Daniel's attorney sent me is dated last month. I didn't sign a report last month. I know. How? Because the signature block does not match the versions on your device. I stood slowly. Leah continued. Nora, someone appears to have submitted a report in your name after making material changes to your conclusions. My first day at Meridian began with a security badge that displayed my photograph, my department, and my actual title. I stared at it longer than necessary. Nora Bennett, Senior Program Lead, Trust and Operations. No one had added temporary, consulting, or Daniel Mercer's partner. The badge belonged to me. Meridian occupied 32 floors of a glass building near Elliott Bay. The company's software supported payroll, logistics, workforce scheduling, and enterprise operations for clients across North America. I had expected the headquarters to feel impersonal. Instead, the lobby smelled faintly of coffee and wet wool. Employees hurried through the security gates carrying lunch containers and bicycle helmets. A technician knelt beside a malfunctioning display while a vice president waited without complaint. The company was large enough that one broken screen did not become a crisis requiring everyone's attention. That alone felt luxurious. Marisol Chan met me on the 21st floor. She was 47, compact and composed with silver beginning at her temples. An old mechanical kitchen timer sat beside her monitor. You have 20 minutes for orientation questions, she said. At the end of 20 minutes, this rings whether we are finished or not. I glanced at the timer. Does that happen often? We are rarely finished. That is why people need priorities. I liked her immediately. She reviewed my responsibilities. I would evaluate operational risks in platform businesses, design controls for enterprise clients, and support integration teams during partnerships or acquisitions. You disclosed your prior consulting relationship with Hearthline Workforce, she said. Yes. Any ownership interest? No. Pending litigation. My attorney is reviewing a dispute involving unpaid invoices and altered work product. Marisol's gaze sharpened, but her tone did not change. Document it with compliance. If Hearthline appears in our pipeline, you will recuse yourself from recommendations and voting. Understood. Your history gives you context. It does not give you control of the verdict. The mechanical timer rang. Marisol turned it off. Orientation complete. Adrian was waiting outside her office. He wore a navy suit without a tie and carried 2 paper cups. I wasn't sure how you take your coffee, he said, offering me one. So that's tea. I accepted it. A cautious strategy. I work in integration. Caution is how we avoid buying expensive disasters. He showed me the department, introduced me to analysts, counsel, and project managers, then led me to a desk near the windows. A welcome folder sat beside a new laptop. My name was printed on the folder. I had not realized how hungry I was to see it attached to something legitimate. The first 3 weeks moved quickly. Meridian did not need me to save it. That required adjustment. At Hearthline, every question had arrived as an emergency because Daniel avoided decisions until they became urgent. At Meridian, meetings had agendas, responsibilities were recorded. If someone missed a deadline, the company did not collapse before lunch. I still worked too late. On my 6th evening, Adrian found me alone in a conference room revising a vendor risk framework. The building will not give you a medal for being the last person here, he said. I'm not looking for a medal. What are you looking for? I nearly said proof. Instead, I closed the document. A finished draft. It was due tomorrow afternoon. I know. He leaned against the doorframe. Marisol warned me you would do this. She barely knows me. She reads work patterns faster than most people read biographies. I saved the file. Adrian nodded toward the screen. Your methodology looks familiar. My stomach tightened. Familiar how? There was an anonymous white paper circulating last year. The human cost of fast scale. The author used a similar distinction between visible failures and transferred harm. I had written the paper after a Hearthline contractor was injured while unloading banquet equipment. Daniel had settled the immediate complaint, but no one changed the system that created the risk. I published it under the initials NB because Daniel said investors might think I was criticizing the platform economy. Did you agree with it? I asked. With most of it? Which part didn't you agree with? The author assumed executives ignore transferred harm because they don't care. Sometimes they care and still convince themselves survival justifies delay. That sounds worse. It can be. He studied me. You wrote it. It was not a question. I looked back at the document. Yes. Why publish anonymously? Professional complications, meaning Hearthline. I did not answer. Adrian pulled out a chair and sat across from me. That paper was part of the reason your resume reached our department. Who sent it? I don't know. Recruiting received it with a recommendation. Initials CW. His expression told me he had seen the record. Confidential referrals are handled by recruiting. So you can't tell me. I genuinely don't know. I believed him. That was new too. With Daniel, I had often known he was withholding something because his explanations became too detailed. Adrian simply admitted the boundary of his knowledge at the end of my third week. Marisol asked me to present a control model to a regional leadership committee. I prepared until midnight for 3 nights. When the meeting began, one of the executives challenged my assumption about contractor turnover costs. At Hearthline, Daniel would have interrupted to soften my answer. Adrian stayed silent. I explained the model, acknowledged the limitation, and proposed a narrower test. The executive nodded. Run it. That was all. No one rescued me. No one needed to. Afterward, Adrian joined me in the elevator. You were right not to overstate the data, he said. I thought you might step in. You didn't need me to. The words should not have felt intimate. They did. That evening, Daniel called for the first time since Leah sent the preservation notice. I almost let it go to voicemail. Then I answered because silence did not erase professional obligations. What do you need? Congratulations on Meridian. Thank you. I heard you're already presenting to leadership. How? Seattle is not that large. It was an evasive answer. What do you need, Daniel? Hearthline is preparing a strategic partnership proposal. With Meridian. Yes. My hand tightened around the phone. Why? Because Meridian is expanding its workforce platform portfolio. You knew I worked there before you submitted. Your position does not control procurement. That wasn't my question, he sighed. Yes. I stood from my couch and walked to the window of my new apartment. It was a small one-bedroom in Queen and with uneven floors and a view of a brick wall. I loved it. You should disclose our history in the proposal, I said. We already have. Including the ownership dispute. There is no ownership dispute. My attorney disagrees. Your attorney is creating one. You circulated an altered report with my name on it. It was updated by the compliance team. I was the compliance team. You were one contributor. I closed my eyes. That was how he would rewrite our history now, not as the woman who built his systems, but as one contributor among many. What are you asking from me? I said. Nothing improper. I'm asking you not to prejudice the process. I'll recuse myself. Silence. That seems extreme. It protects both of us. You know Hearthline better than anyone. Your context could help. You want my context when it benefits you and my absence when ownership comes up. That's not fair. He still said it as if fairness were something I owed him. I'll disclose everything to Meridian Compliance tomorrow. Nora, wait. What? The wedding is next month. I'm aware. Claire wants to invite you. For a moment I thought I had misheard him. No. She feels terrible about how this happened. She should. She wants some kind of closure. I'm not attending your wedding so Claire can feel like a better person. You said you wouldn't stop us. I'm not stopping you. I ended the call. The next morning, I submitted a formal conflict disclosure to Marisol and Meridian's legal department. I listed my relationship with Daniel, my former consulting role, the unpaid invoices, the altered report, and Leah's involvement. Marisol read the disclosure in silence. You will have no access to the evaluation workspace, she said. Do not discuss the matter with the project team unless legal requests information. Understood. Adrian will also be removed from final commercial voting because he supervises your integration work. I looked at him. That isn't necessary. It is, Marisol said. Perception matters. Adrian nodded without argument. After the meeting, he walked with me toward the elevators. I'm sorry my disclosure affected you. It affected one vote. You don't sound bothered. I've survived worse than missing a committee vote. The elevator doors opened, but neither of us stepped inside. He said, "Team dinner is Thursday. Is that an invitation or an instruction?" An invitation, 8 people, public restaurant. No hidden professional consequences if you decline. I smiled despite myself. You're very careful. I prefer clarity. I'll come. At dinner, I learned Adrian disliked olives. Marisol collected antique clocks. And 2 analysts had been secretly competing over who could bring the strangest lunch to work. For 2 hours, no one asked about Daniel. When the others left, Adrian and I walked toward the parking garage. Rain tapped against the metal awning overhead. Why did you leave your family company? I asked. His expression changed slightly. That's a long story. You don't have to tell me. I know. He put his hands in his coat pockets. My father believed every problem could be managed if the company stayed profitable long enough. I eventually disagreed with his definition of managed. Was someone hurt? Yes. He did not elaborate. I understood the boundary and let it remain. He looked at me. Why did you stay at Hearthline without equity? Daniel needed help. That's not the same question. I looked out at the wet street. I thought being necessary was safer than being loved. Adrian was quiet for several steps. Necessary people are often treated like infrastructure, he said. Everyone notices when they stop working. Few people ask whether they're tired. The following Monday, Meridian's corporate development portal generated a notification. Because I had been named in Hearthline's submission, compliance allowed me to view the non-confidential cover sheet. The company had described me as early core management member responsible for operational design and initial compliance architecture. I read the sentence twice. Daniel had denied I was a partner when ownership mattered. Now, when Meridian wanted evidence of experienced management, I was core leadership again. Below the cover sheet was a signed declaration stating that Hearthline possessed full rights to all operational frameworks developed during its first 5 years, including mine. I forwarded the notice to Leah and Marisol. Then I sat at my desk, looking at my name inside another man's proposal. For the first time since the cafe, I felt something hotter than grief. Hearthline had not merely followed me into my new life. Daniel had carried my work through the door and presented it as his invitation. Claire asked to meet 1 week before the wedding. Her message contained no greeting. Please give me 30 minutes. I won't ask again. I nearly deleted it. Then I remembered the unanswered questions that had followed me through my first life. Not because answers would have healed me, but because uncertainty had allowed me to invent explanations more painful than the truth. We met in the conservatory of a downtown hotel owned by the Whitmore family. Claire chose a table beneath a lemon tree. The glass ceiling turned the gray Seattle daylight pale green. She wore no engagement ring. I noticed immediately. It's being cleaned, she said. I didn't ask. You looked? I'm allowed to look at things without wanting them. Her mouth twisted. For a few seconds we sat like strangers who happened to know the details of each other's childhoods. Claire had held my hair while I was sick after my first college party. I had slept beside her for 3 nights after her mother died. She knew I hated artificial vanilla and that I read the final page of mystery novels when I became anxious. I knew she counted windows in unfamiliar rooms when she felt trapped. She was counting them now, 7 along the east wall, 5 facing the courtyard. You said you wouldn't stop the wedding, she began. I won't. My father received a letter from Nora Grant. Leah Grant, your attorney. Yes. He thinks you're preparing to challenge the Whitmore investment. I'm challenging the use of my work in my name. Your investment is your family's responsibility. He may postpone the final funding. That is between him and Daniel. Claire pressed her fingertips against the table. I need to know you're not planning something on Saturday. What kind of something? Contacting the press, sending documents to the guests, appearing during the ceremony. The examples were painfully specific because they resembled what I had done in my first life. I had not contacted the press, but I had emailed Claire's father and several Hearthline investors the night before the wedding. Then I had entered the hotel during the reception and demanded Daniel admit he had used my work. Security escorted me out. The video had circulated privately throughout the Seattle business community. For months I had been the woman from the Whitmore wedding. I won't be there, I said. Claire searched my face. Why not? Because I don't want to watch you marry him. She looked down. That's fair. It isn't a gift to you. I know. Do you? Her eyes lifted. I don't want you thinking my absence means I approve, forgive you or believe your version of events. What do you believe? That my boyfriend and my closest friend carried on a relationship for 3 months, then announced their engagement while expecting me to continue supporting his company. It wasn't that simple. It rarely is. Claire glanced toward the courtyard. Daniel was falling apart last fall. So was I. He didn't let you see it. I was there every day. You were there fixing payroll, vendor contracts, and scheduling failures. Every conversation became a list of things he had done wrong, because he asked me to solve them. I know. Then what point are you making? Claire's composure cracked. He felt small around you. The words landed quietly. I sat back. She continued before I could respond. I'm not saying that was your fault. I know how much you did. But he would call me from his mother's facility and say he couldn't tell you about another bill because you would open a spreadsheet before he finished talking. I opened spreadsheets because bills have numbers. He needed someone to tell him he wasn't failing. And you did? Yes. There was no pride in her answer, only grief. I thought of Daniel sitting beside me at the cafe, asking me to keep working 10 weeks before his wedding. He didn't feel too small to use me, I said. Claire closed her eyes. No? You made him feel capable because you had money and connections he needed. That's cruel. It's also true. I loved him before my father agreed to anything. I believe you. She looked startled. You do? Yes. For some reason that made her cry, she turned her face away and pressed a napkin beneath one eye. I wish you hated me in a simpler way, she whispered. I wish you had betrayed me in a simpler way. We sat in silence. After a while, Claire said, My father never thought I could run anything. He let me attend meetings because clients liked me. He let me host events, smile for photographs, and remember people's wives' names. You had access most people would kill for. I know. That doesn't mean it didn't hurt. She looked at me for one fragile second. We were almost ourselves again. Then I remembered Daniel's ring on her hand. Understanding did not restore trust. When Daniel needed the healthcare placement for his mother, she said, I handled it. No one asked whether I was qualified. I made one call and something changed. For once, I wasn't decoration. And he made you feel useful. He made me feel chosen. The honesty hurt. I had wanted the same thing from him. Perhaps that was why we had both mistaken his need for love. Claire reached into her handbag and placed a folded document on the table. I did not touch it. What is that? A statement from Hearthline's counsel. It confirms that your earlier research informed the current compliance framework, but that the revisions were completed internally. You want me to sign it? It would clarify the record. It would retroactively validate a report I did not approve. It doesn't say you approved the final report. It implies continuity. My father wants reassurance before releasing the final loan amount. There it was. Not yet. I had told her outside the apartment. She had asked me to lie exactly 1 month later. No? Nora, please read it. I don't need to. If the bridge funding is delayed, Hearthline may miss payroll. Then Daniel should tell his board. People will lose their jobs. That is not something my signature can honestly solve. Her expression hardened. You're willing to let innocent people suffer because of what we did. No, Daniel built a company that requires a false statement from his former girlfriend to make payroll. You make everything sound so clean. It isn't clean. I leaned forward. I still wake up wanting to call you. I still see something ridiculous and reach for my phone because you're the person I would have sent it to. Then I remember you were sleeping with Daniel while asking me whether I thought he would ever propose. Claire's face crumpled. This is not clean, I said. I'm simply refusing to make it dirtier. I stood. She looked at the unsigned statement between us. Are you happy at Meridian? The question stopped me. I'm learning how to be. I'm glad. Her voice sounded sincere. That made me angrier than another lie would have. Why? Because you were disappearing at Hearthline. You helped Daniel hide an affair from me. I know. Don't speak as if you rescued me. I didn't. She stared at the document. I just knew you should have left long before this. I walked away before I asked how she knew about the offer. On Saturday morning, the wedding day, I woke before sunrise. My apartment was quiet. No emergency messages from Hearthline waited on my phone. No schedule changes. No requests from Claire to approve flowers or help calm Daniel. I made coffee and stood barefoot at the window at 10. A courier arrived to collect a small package. Inside was a silver and sapphire brooch. That had belonged to Claire's mother before she died. She had asked me to make sure Claire wore it on her wedding day because Claire was too distraught to listen. I had carried that promise for 9 years. Keeping it did not mean I blessed the marriage. It meant Claire's mother had trusted me once, and I wanted one part of our history to remain uncorrupted. I sent the brooch without a note. Then I went to Meridian. The office was nearly empty. I worked through an analysis until the words blurred. Around 4, Adrian appeared beside my desk. You're aware it's Saturday, yes. You're also aware the building permits employees to leave. I've heard rumors. He placed a cup of tea near my keyboard. I'm not going to ask whether you want company. Why not? Because then you might say yes to make me feel useful or no to prove you're fine. I looked at him. What are you going to do? Leave the tea and go home. That sounds carefully neutral. It is. He turned to leave, then placed a small square of paper beside the cup. After he was gone, I read it. Home is allowed to be quiet at 6. I shut down my computer. I did not search for wedding photographs. I did not ask mutual friends whether Daniel cried when Claire walked down the aisle. I drove home, heated soup, and watched a documentary about ocean currents. At 9:30, Claire sent one message, a photograph of the sapphire brooch pinned to her dress. Thank you for remembering her. I did not answer. 2 days later, Meridian's acquisition team formally opened its Hearthline due diligence review. The announcement appeared in the internal project registry. Because of my conflict declaration, I could not access the files. I read only the project title, Hearthline Workforce Strategic Partnership and Potential Acquisition Assessment. Daniel and Claire had been married for less than 48 hours. Their perfect future was already being audited. Due diligence was not dramatic. No one burst into Daniel's office carrying a warrant. No account froze overnight. No executive announced that Hearthline had been exposed. The process began with document requests, corporate structure, tax history, employee and contractor classifications, insurance coverage, customer contracts, intellectual property assignments, complaints, disputes, and threatened claims. Each item had a deadline. Each response created more questions. Because I had recused myself, I learned almost nothing directly. Marisol ensured the boundary was absolute. When Hearthline came up in a meeting, I left the room. My access permissions excluded the deal folder. Analysts who worked on the review were instructed not to discuss it with me. At first, the exclusion frustrated me. Then I understood its value. Whatever happened to Hearthline could not honestly be described as my verdict. I focused on another project involving a regional delivery platform. The company wanted to reduce injury claims without changing the quota system that caused workers to rush. During a review call, one executive said, "We need a control that doesn't interfere with productivity," I answered. "Then you don't need a safety control, you need better public relations." Silence followed. Marisol turned her old kitchen timer over in her hand. The executive frowned. "That's unnecessarily confrontational." "It's accurate," Adrian said from the other end of the table. He did not take over my argument. He simply refused to let the room pretend I had said something unreasonable. The client eventually agreed to test a lower quota during high risk hours. After the meeting, Marisol stopped me. "Your conclusion was right. I hear a qualification coming. Your delivery made it easier for him to defend himself than to examine the problem." I considered that. How would you have said it? I would have asked which injury cost they had decided to accept. That sounds worse. It sounds like a question. The mechanical timer rang in her hand. She smiled faintly and walked away. Meridian challenged me in ways Hearthline never had. At Daniel's company, disagreement meant disloyalty. At Meridian, disagreement could be examined, revised, or rejected without becoming a referendum on my love. I was beginning to understand how much energy I had spent managing Daniel's feelings around professional facts. Then the rumors began. A former Hearthline account manager sent me a message. "Daniel says Meridian only opened the review because you pushed for it." I took a screenshot and forwarded it to Leah. Her reply came within minutes. "Do not respond publicly, keep records." The next day, a mutual friend named Paige invited me to lunch. She spent 10 minutes discussing her children before saying, "Daniel thinks you're trying to ruin him." I recused myself. "That's not what he says." "What does he say?" "That you kept company files and gave them to Meridian." I provided documents to my attorney. Meridian received only materials requested through legal channels. Paige stirred her salad. "He says the report issue is a misunderstanding. Then, due diligence should clear it up." She looked uncomfortable. "Claire is under a lot of pressure. So am I. I'm not choosing sides. People usually said that after carrying one side's message I set down my fork." "Then don't." Paige blinked. "Don't what?" Don't deliver accusations on Daniel's behalf and call it neutrality. She left lunch offended, I left relieved. 2 days later, Leah asked me to visit her office. More yellow notes covered her desk than usual. Hearthline's counsel responded to our preservation letter, she said. They deny altering a report improperly. What do they claim? That your initial report was a working draft and that an internal compliance group finalized it. There was no internal compliance group. That is one issue. She pointed to the first yellow note. Another issue is that the file history contains a revision under Daniel's administrator account after the date you stopped consulting. So he changed it. Someone using his account did. I nodded. Leah touched the second note. The revised version removes your warning that certain workers may qualify as employees under state law tests despite being labeled independent contractors. That warning affected the financial model. Because employee classification would increase payroll taxes, insurance obligations, and administrative costs. Yes. The revised report states the risk is low if workers sign updated acknowledgments. I never wrote that. I know. She touched the third note. Hearthline has been asking workers to sign updated agreements. Recently. Some appear to be backdated. My stomach turned. Can they do that? They can ask workers to sign new agreements. Backdating or misrepresenting when records were created is another matter. Who found this? Hearthline produced samples during the commercial review. Meridian's external counsel noticed inconsistencies. I stared at her. So Meridian already knows. Meridian knows there are questions. Do not assume the outcome. Leah gathered the notes into a stack. There's also an intellectual property problem. Hearthline claims the redline matrix belongs entirely to the company. They didn't pay the final invoices. That strengthens your contract claim. It does not automatically mean you can withdraw all use of the framework without consequences. We negotiate. I don't want to shut down their systems. Good. A reasonable position helps. As I left Leah's office, Daniel called. I answered on the sidewalk. Did you send Meridian our worker agreements? No. They asked for records going back 3 years. That's normal in due diligence. You told them what to ask for. I'm not on the project. You designed Meridian's review framework? No, I joined 3 weeks before your submission. Don't play technical games. I stopped walking. What do you want me to say? That you'll clarify the original report was preliminary. It wasn't preliminary. Every report changes. Not every report loses the page that changes the company's valuation. He went silent. Cars hissed over wet pavement. Finally, he said, "You have no idea what happens if this deal fails. I know exactly what happens when people hide risk until someone else pays for it. You want to be right more than you care who gets hurt." The accusation stayed with me long after the call ended. That evening, I attended a small Meridian reception for new managers. Adrian found me standing alone near the windows. "You're crushing that sparkling water," he observed. I loosened my grip on the glass. Daniel called. "You don't have to tell me. I know." I looked out at the bay. He says workers will lose their jobs if the transaction fails. Possibly. You're supposed to tell me he's manipulating me. He may be. That doesn't make the possible job losses imaginary. I turned toward him. That isn't helpful. Would you prefer comfort or honesty? I'm not sure. Then I'll wait. He stood beside me without speaking. After a minute, I said, "What happened at your father's company?" His face tightened. "A machine guard failed at one of our plants. A maintenance worker lost the use of his right hand. I'm sorry. The inspection team had warned management. My father delayed the shutdown because we were behind on a major contract. Did you know?" "Not until after the accident." "What did you do?" "I released the internal report to the board and regulators." I studied him. "Your father thought you betrayed him." "He still does." "Did the company survive?" "Yes." "Did your relationship?" "No." The answer contained no self-pity, only fact. Was it worth it? I asked. Adrian looked through the glass at the dark water. "I don't know if worth is the right measurement. A man lost his hand. My father lost his trust in me. I kept mine in myself." The next morning, I received an email from a man named Theo Gaines. He had found my address through an old professional contact, M.S. Bennett. I worked Hearthline hotel shifts for 18 months. I got hurt unloading tables last week. The hotel says I work for Hearthline. Hearthline says I'm an independent contractor and should use my own insurance. I don't know who is responsible. Someone told me you used to handle compliance. Can you explain? I forwarded the email to Leah without answering. She referred him to a nonprofit employment clinic. 3 days later, Claire called. Her voice was barely recognizable. The Whitmore board received Meridian's initial questions. I'm sorry. No, you're not. I'm sorry you're in pain. I'm not sorry the questions exist. She let out a brittle laugh. My father says the report versions don't match. They don't. He wants me to prove the current one is valid. I can't help you. You can sign the clarification. No. Nora, the board is meeting Friday. I still can't sign it. If they decide I misrepresented the investment, they'll remove me from strategy. You knew the report had changed. I knew Daniel updated it. I didn't know he removed the classification warning. I believed her. That did not make her innocent. What do you want from me? I asked. Confirm that the framework is based on your work. It is. Then sign that. The proposed statement implies I approve the final version. We can revise the wording. No wording can make me responsible for conclusions I did not reach. Her breathing became uneven. You always know exactly where the line is. No, I learned after you both crossed it. She hung up. An hour later, Marisol called me into her office. The Hearthline team identified significant concerns, she said. You are not to contact anyone associated with the company about the review. I haven't. I know. She turned the mechanical timer without setting it. There may also be a state labor inquiry involving an injured worker. Theo Gaines, her eyebrows rose. He contacted me. I referred him to counsel and disclosed that to Leah. Document it with compliance. I will. Marisol watched me for a moment. This is about to become more difficult. How difficult? The transaction may fail. I looked at the timer in her hand. What did they find? I cannot tell you. That afternoon, an anonymous account posted in a Seattle startup forum that a resentful former girlfriend had manipulated a corporate review to destroy her ex-boyfriend's company. The post did not name me. It did not need to. By evening, 3 former colleagues had sent me screenshots. Daniel's private accusation had become a public story, and I was no longer certain silence would be enough to survive it. Leah read the anonymous post twice. Do not respond, she said. It makes me look guilty. It makes an unnamed former girlfriend look vindictive. Everyone in our industry knows who it means. Then we preserve it. She placed another yellow note on her desk. Reputation disputes tempt people into producing too much information that creates legal risk and makes you appear emotionally involved in the underlying review. I am emotionally involved. You are allowed to feel that. You are not allowed to let strangers on a forum direct your legal strategy. I leaned back in the chair. What can we do? If Daniel or someone acting for Hearthline names you or makes a provably false statement, we send a formal demand. Until then, your strongest protection is the documented conflict recusal. It felt inadequate. In my first life, I had tried to correct every lie immediately. Each correction created another argument, another screenshot, another reason for people to describe me as unstable. This time, I followed Leah's advice. I said nothing. The silence hurt. At work, 2 colleagues stopped speaking when I entered the break room. One gave me an embarrassed smile. The other asked whether I wanted coffee in a tone usually reserved for hospital waiting rooms. Marisol addressed the issue without mentioning Hearthline. At the next department meeting, she said, employees involved in confidential reviews will not be evaluated based on external speculation. Anyone with a compliance concern should report it through the proper channel rather than discussing it socially. No one looked at me. Everyone understood. Afterward, I thanked her. I did not do it for you personally, she said. I know. Good personal favors create confusing debts. The sentence reminded me of Adrian. That evening, Theo called. Leah had asked whether I was willing to speak with him only about the historical structure of Hearthline. With counsel present, I agreed. Theo was 42 and worked overnight setups at hotels, conference centers, and sports venues. He carried a small notebook in which he recorded every shift, supervisor, and payment. I started writing things down because the app changed my hours twice, he said during the video call. People think night workers don't keep records. His injury was a torn shoulder caused when a stack of folding tables slipped from a damaged cart. The hotel said he had been assigned through Hearthline. Hearthline said it merely connected independent workers to clients. Theo had no employer-sponsored insurance. His individual plan carried a deductible he could not afford. I'm not trying to shut anyone down, he said. I need physical therapy. I have rent. The abstract classification issue became a man sitting at a kitchen table with his arm in a sling. I remembered Daniel's words. People will lose their jobs. Theo had already lost his income. The cost had not appeared in Hearthline's projections because it had been transferred to him. After the call, I sat alone. In a small conference room, Adrian knocked on the glass. You missed lunch. I wasn't hungry. That's not what the untouched sandwich suggests. He entered and sat across from me. I told him about Theo without sharing confidential details. I wrote the warning, I said. I knew this could happen. You wrote it down. I didn't force Daniel to act. You were a consultant, not a regulator. I stayed. Adrian looked at me carefully. You're trying to convert guilt into control. What does that mean? If everything was your responsibility, then the past becomes fixable. You only need to work harder. The accuracy irritated me. You make that sound unhealthy. It exhausted you badly enough that you didn't notice your boyfriend was marrying someone else. I stared at him. He winced. That was too direct. No, it was true. I stood, gathered the untouched sandwich and walked out. For the rest of the afternoon, I avoided him. At 7, I found him waiting near the elevators. I'm sorry. He said. You already said that. I'm saying it again without defending the point. I pressed the elevator button. I don't need you to treat me like I'm fragile. I don't? You think I'm using work to avoid my life. I think you use competence to avoid needing anything from anyone. The elevator arrived. I stepped inside. He did not follow. That should have relieved me. Instead, when the doors closed, I felt abandoned. The contradiction was humiliating. 2 days later, Daniel was waiting outside Meridian's lobby. Security would not let him upstairs, so he stood beneath the entrance canopy in the rain. I considered leaving through the parking garage. Then I walked toward him. You can't come here, I said. I called. I blocked your personal number after the forum post. I didn't write that. Did you tell people I manipulated the review? I said you had influence. I recused myself. You built the standards they're using. I did not build Meridian's due diligence process. You taught them where to look. The law taught them where to look. He laughed bitterly. You sound like Adrian Shaw now. The fact that he knew Adrian's name made my skin prickle. How do you know him? He's listed on the integration team. You've been looking at employees associated with me. I've been researching the company, evaluating mine. That doesn't explain why you're here. His anger collapsed for a moment. He looked like the Daniel who had slept in a chair beside his mother's hospital bed. The care facility called, he said. They're raising the monthly rate. I said nothing. I know that isn't your problem. No, you don't. He looked down at the wet pavement. Hearthline is the only asset I have. If Meridian walks away and Claire's father pulls the bridge financing, I lose the company. If I lose the company, I can't keep my mother where she is. You should speak to a financial advisor and the facility. I need time. What do you want me to do? Clarify the report. I can't. You can say the original classification warning was conservative. It was accurate. Legal standards are not always clear. That's why the report recommended a jurisdiction-specific review. You know how early-stage companies work. We couldn't afford 12 different legal opinions. So you removed the warning. We simplified it for investors. I stared at him. You hit a cost because you were afraid they wouldn't fund you. I was trying to keep the company alive. And Theo Gaines is paying for that decision. His face changed. You spoke to him? With counsel. You're building a case. No, he contacted me because no one would tell him who was responsible for his injury. Hearthline offered him $500. He needs months of physical therapy. He signed an independent contractor agreement. That agreement may not decide his legal status. Daniel stepped closer. Do you want everyone to be an employee? Payroll taxes, workers' compensation, overtime rules. Hearthline would have never launched. Then perhaps the business model was not as profitable as you told investors. You think companies begin perfect? No, I think imperfect companies are still required to tell the truth about who absorbs the imperfection. He looked at me as though I had become someone else. Maybe I had. You used to understand pressure, he said. I understood yours so completely that I stopped recognizing anyone else's, including my own. Daniel's eyes filled, but he blinked the emotion away. I did love you. The confession came too late and without relevance. I know. You don't believe me. I do. His expression broke. I continued. That's why this hurt. Love did not stop you from using me. A security officer glanced through the glass doors. Daniel stepped back. If Hearthline fails, you'll have proved your point. I'm not trying to prove a point. Then what are you trying to do? I thought of Leah's notes, Marisol's timer, Theo's notebook, Adrian waiting outside an elevator without forcing his way into it. Stop paying for your choices. I went inside that night. My mother called. Daniel came to see me, she said. My stomach tightened. Why? He's desperate. That doesn't give him the right to involve you. He said there may be a way to settle everything privately, by asking me to sign a false statement. He said it isn't false. It is, Ruth sighed. I'm not saying you should lie, I'm only asking whether there's some compromise. There is. Hearthline can correct the report, compensate workers properly, and renegotiate its valuation. That could destroy the company. Then the company is already in trouble. He's worried about his mother. So am I. She was kind to me. Then help him. The word struck a place I had spent weeks trying to rebuild. Mom, he married Claire. This is about his mother, not the marriage. It's always about something other than what he did. Ruth was quiet, I continued. When Dad left, you did. Everyone asked you to protect his business. That was different. How? He didn't have a sick mother. There will always be a reason. Nora, I don't want you to become hard. I don't want to become useful enough that no one cares what they ask me to survive. I ended the call before she could answer. My hand shook for several minutes. I stood in my kitchen staring at the wall. Then someone knocked. I expected Daniel. It was Adrian. He held a paper bag from the Thai restaurant down the street. How did you know where I live? You put your address on the emergency contact update. That does not explain why you're here. Marisol called me. I stared. She said you left work upset. She did not tell me why. And you came to check on me? Yes, I'm fine. I brought enough food for 2 fine people. I should have sent him away. Instead, I opened the door wider. We ate on the kitchen floor because my table was covered with unopened boxes. The food grew cold while I told him about Daniel, Theo, and my mother. Adrian did not interrupt. When I finished, I said, you can tell me I'm using competence to avoid feelings. I think tonight's feelings are adequately present. I laughed unexpectedly. The sound turned into a sob. I covered my face. Adrian remained where he was. He did not touch me until I lowered my hands and leaned toward him. Then he placed one arm around my shoulders. No promises, no solutions, just warmth. For the first time, receiving comfort did not feel like accepting a debt. The next morning, I received a message from Meridian Recruiting. The confidential individual who referred you has authorized us to disclose their identity. Please contact us at your convenience. I already knew. Still, hearing the recruiter say it made the room tilt. The recommendation came from Claire Whitmore, she explained. She sent your resume an anonymous white paper in January while sleeping with Daniel before the cafe, before the engagement. Claire had betrayed me and opened the door to my escape at the same time. I did not know which truth hurt more. Claire agreed to meet at Green Lake because neither of us wanted walls around the conversation. It was early April. The trees had begun to bloom, but the air remained cold enough to keep most people moving. Claire stood near the water in a dark coat. She was not wearing her wedding ring this time. She did not explain. You referred me to Meridian, I said. She nodded. Why? Because you deserved the position. Try again. She looked away. A runner passed us, shoes striking the path in a steady rhythm. I read the white paper, Claire said. I knew it was yours. How? You sent me the first draft. I remembered a year earlier, I had emailed her after midnight and asked whether the language sounded too angry. She had replied with comments the next morning. I had forgotten she had not. You told me to publish it anonymously, I said, because Daniel would have stopped you otherwise. And then you sent it to Meridian. Yes. Without telling me. I knew you wouldn't go if he asked you to stay. The certainty in her voice enraged me. You made a decision about my life. I created an option. You hid the option's origin. Would you have accepted it if you knew it came from me? No. That's why. I stared at her. You don't get to use my likely reaction as permission to manipulate me. I know that now. You knew it then. Her eyes filled. I knew part of it. Which part? That you were disappearing. Every conversation was Hearthline. Every holiday became a work trip. Daniel took your ability and turned it into a utility. And you decided the solution was to take Daniel. I didn't decide that. You slept with him? Yes, her voice broke. I did one good thing for a selfish reason and one selfish thing while telling myself it was love. I don't know how to separate them. You don't have to. They happen together. We began walking. The lake was gray beneath the morning sky, Claire said. The first time Daniel kissed me, I had already sent your resume. I stopped. Why does that matter? Because I need you to know I didn't refer you out of guilt. No, you referred me because you wanted me gone. Her face flinched. That was part of it. At least she was honest. I wanted you to have the job, she said. I also wanted space where I wouldn't have to look at you every day and know what I was doing. You could have stopped. I tried. Did you? We didn't speak for 2 weeks in January. And then, his mother had another medical crisis. Of course, there was always a crisis available to make betrayal feel unavoidable. I went to the hospital, Claire said. He said he couldn't call you because you were preparing the investor package. I would have gone. He knew. The answer hurt in a new way. Daniel had not hidden his fear because he thought I would fail him. He had hidden it because my presence would have complicated what he wanted from Claire. We resumed walking. My father has suspended the second loan installment, Claire said. The board is reviewing my role. I heard. Daniel thinks you caused it. Do you? She took time before answering. No. That surprised me. I think Daniel caused most of it. I helped. What changed? I saw the unpaid invoices. I looked at her. He told me you had volunteered your final work as an equity contribution, she said. He said you later refused the shares because you wanted a clean break. He never offered shares. I know. How? I asked his attorney. For the documents. After the wedding. Yes, the wind lifted her hair. I married him without knowing what agreements he had with you, she said. I believed what made it easier to marry him. Now you know how that feels. I do. There was no satisfaction in saying it. Claire reached into her bag and removed another document. I had the statement revised. I did not take it. It only says the red line matrix was originally developed by you, she said. It does not say you approved the final report. What does the next paragraph say? She was silent. That Hearthline received rights to use the framework through my consulting relationship. Yes. They didn't pay for the relevant work. The ownership issue could take months to resolve. Then let it. If you sign, the board may release enough funding to complete the review. No? Nora? No. She stopped walking. I helped you get Meridian. The moment the words left her mouth, Claire's face changed. She knew what she had done. I felt something inside me become very still. There it is, I said. I didn't mean. You did. I'm sorry. You thought the offer created a balance. You gave me something, so now I should give you something. That isn't what I believe. It's what you reached for when I said no. She covered her mouth briefly. I hate who I am around this. You chose who you were around this. That's easy for you to say. No, it isn't. Her anger surfaced. You always had a skill no one could take from you. You could walk into a room and make people listen because you knew what you were talking about. You think that happened automatically. My father treated me like a decoration. And Daniel treated me like unpaid infrastructure. We were both diminished. You used me to escape yours. She looked at me with tears on her cheeks. Why can you understand his mother and not understand my family? I understand you. Then why won't you help? Because understanding is not the same as volunteering to be harmed again. We stood facing each other while strangers passed around us. I loved you. Claire whispered. The past tense broke something open in my chest. I loved you too. Maybe we still do. Maybe. Hope appeared in her expression. I ended it before it could become another misunderstanding. That does not mean I trust you. Claire lowered her eyes. I don't know how to fix this. You may not be able to. We parted near the parking lot. I returned to Meridian with cold hands and a headache. Adrian found me reviewing a project schedule. You met Claire, he said. How do you know? You look like you've spent the morning carrying something heavy. I closed the file. She referred me here. I heard from recruiting. Did you know before today? No. I believed him, but my body remained tense. She says she wanted me to have a better life. That may be true. She also wanted me out of the way. That may also be true. I looked at him sharply. You don't need to defend her. I'm not. It sounds like you are. I'm saying motives are often mixed. I know that. Then why? Are you angry with me? Because everyone wants me to make room for their complexity. Daniel was afraid. Claire was controlled by her family. My mother was traumatized by her divorce. At what point does anyone make room for what they did to me? Adrian's expression tightened. I have. No, you've analyzed me. That's unfair. The word nearly made me laugh. Of course it is. I stood. He blocked neither the door nor my path. I'm not asking you to forgive Claire, he said. I'm asking whether you intend to let anyone come close enough to disappoint you again. This has nothing to do with us. It has everything to do with us. There is no us. The moment I said it, I regretted it. Adrian's face became unreadable. You're right, he said. Not yet. He stepped aside. That evening, Leah forwarded a formal demand from Hearthline's law firm. The letter accused me of retaining confidential commercial information and interfering with a pending transaction. It required me to return or destroy All copies within 72 hours. I called Leah immediately. Are they suing? Not yet. Can they force me to delete the files? No, we have already preserved them under counsel because they are relevant to disputed ownership and authorship. What do? We respond narrowly. We identify the categories in our possession, confirm preservation, and reject destruction while claims remain pending. Will Meridian think I stole them? Meridian already knows you possess historical work. Product, you disclosed it. I paced across my apartment. This is Daniel's attempt to scare me. Probably. I want to call him. No. I want to tell him I know Claire discovered the unpaid invoices. No. I know. Leah's voice softened. Evidence is not a weapon, Nora, it is a boundary, let me maintain it. The next afternoon, she issued a preservation notice to Hearthline requiring the company to retain file histories, email records, report drafts, payment records, and communications concerning my work. 2 hours later, Daniel sent me a single message from a new number. You have no idea what you just started. I did for the first time, so did he. The commercial mediation took place in a neutral law office overlooking downtown. Leah sat beside me. Daniel arrived with Hearthline's corporate counsel and a board representative named Graham Ellis. Claire was not present. The mediator divided us into separate rooms. For 3 hours, messages traveled back and forth. Hearthline offered partial payment of my outstanding invoices in exchange for a complete intellectual property release and confidentiality agreement. We rejected it. They increased the amount and proposed a public statement describing me as a former consultant whose work had been substantially revised and expanded by internal teams. We rejected that too. Leah wrote numbers and phrases on yellow notes. What do you actually want? She asked. My invoices paid. That is easy. My name removed from the altered report. Reasonable. Recognition that I developed the original framework. Negotiable. And I don't want them saying I interfered with the Meridian review. That requires a mutual non-disparagement clause. I stared at the city through the window. What about the workers? Leah folded her hands. The workers' classification dispute is separate. You do not control it. I know. Do you? I sat down. No. Near noon, Daniel asked to speak with me privately. Leah objected until both attorneys agreed to remain in the hallway with the door partially open. Daniel entered carrying 2 cups of coffee. I did not take one. He set them both on the table. You look tired, he said. So do you. Claire moved into a hotel. I kept my expression still. That's not why we're here. I know. He sat across from me. She found out about the invoices. She told me. His eyes sharpened. You've been speaking to her? She asked me to sign another statement. He looked away. I didn't know she would do that. You benefited from it? I needed the board to release funding. There's always a need. He flinched for a while. Neither of us spoke. Then Daniel said, I didn't start seeing Claire because of the money. I know. You do. She told me enough. He rubbed his thumb against his watch band. I liked how she looked at me. There was shame in the admission. You used to look at me that way. He continued, before Hearthline became real. Before you needed me to identify every problem. Before every conversation made me feel incompetent. I thought of Claire saying the same thing. Did you want me to ignore the problems? No, I wanted to solve one before you found 3 more. You could have hired an operations team. With what money? You could have given me equity. His gaze dropped. That would have made you equal. The answer came so quietly that I nearly missed it. I stared at him. Daniel closed his eyes. I didn't think that consciously. But you thought it. I built Hearthline because I was tired of being the son of a mechanic who couldn't pay for good medical care. I wanted to create something no one could take from me. And then you needed me. Yes. Which made you resent me. Yes. The honesty arrived years too late. Claire had resources, he said. Connections, money, but she didn't understand operations better than I did. I could help her. I could be the competent one. So you loved being needed. He looked at me. The irony passed. Between us, we had both built identities around the same wound. I loved her too, he said. I know. I didn't marry her only for the investment, I know. But when the funding gap opened, the marriage and the investment became tangled. Did Claire know? Some of it. Did she know you owed me money? No. Did she know the Whitmore loan was necessary to cover payroll? Yes. Did she know the report had been altered? She knew it was revised, not what was removed. He did not answer. I leaned back. Did you ever plan to tell me about the affair? Before you secured the Whitmore commitment? His silence lasted too long. No. he said. That was the answer I had carried across 2 lives, not because it surprised me, because hearing it ended the final argument I had been having with an imaginary version of him. You would have kept me working, I said, until the round closed. Then you would have left. Yes. The simplicity of the word hurt less than his excuses had. Thank you for finally telling the truth. He looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. Do you hate me? No. That seemed to wound him. Why not? Because hatred would keep you central. He looked toward the half-open door. What happens now? You correct the record. If Meridian terminates the deal, Hearthline may not survive. Then you restructure. That means layoffs. Probably. My mother. Daniel, he stopped. I am sorry she is sick, I said. I am sorry you are afraid. I am not going to sign away reality so you can postpone being afraid. He nodded once. When he left the room, he forgot both cups of coffee. The mediation ended without resolution outside. Adrian was waiting near the building entrance. I had not asked him to come. Leah told Marisol the session might run late, he explained. Marisol told me you would claim you didn't need a ride. I have a car. In the Meridian garage. I had taken a company shuttle downtown that morning. You all discuss me too much. Only when your logistical decisions are poor. We walked toward his car. I was exhausted enough to accept help without arguing. At my apartment, we stood beneath the building awning. Do you want to come up? I asked. Adrian searched my face. Why? The question embarrassed me. Because I'm inviting you. That answers what you're doing, not why. I don't know. I think you do. Rain struck the sidewalk beyond us. I stepped closer and kissed him. For one heartbeat, he did not move. Then his hand touched my cheek and he kissed me back. The warmth of it frightened me. I wanted to forget Daniel's confession, Claire's absence, the mediation, and the version of myself who had died wanting someone to tell her she mattered. I reached for Adrian's coat. He pulled back gently. What? I asked. You're hurting. That doesn't mean I don't want this. No. Then why are you stopping? Because I don't want to be the person you choose tonight to prove Daniel is no longer the last man who touched your life. Anger flashed through me. You think this is about him? I think almost everything is about him right now, even when you hate that. That's insulting. It may be. You could simply say you don't want me. Adrian's expression changed. I have wanted you for weeks. The honesty silenced me, he continued. That is why I am not going upstairs. I crossed my arms. You decide what's best for me too. No, I'm deciding what I will participate in. The distinction hurt because it was fair. I'm not Claire, he said. I'm not moving you toward the life I think you should have. I'm telling you what I need. And what is that? To know that when you choose me, you are not looking over my shoulder to see whether Daniel notices. He stepped back into the rain. Good night, Nora. I watched him walk away. The next morning, Meridian's Executive Review Committee completed its preliminary recommendation. Marisol told me only what compliance permitted. The committee has recommended ending the Hearthline transaction. Even though I had expected it, my stomach dropped. Is it final? Corporate development will issue notice after council completes the record. What happens to them? That is not ours to determine. I nodded. Marisol set the kitchen timer for 10 minutes. You may sit here until this rings. Why? Because you are about to pretend you have an urgent task. I sat. At minute 6, an email appeared in my personal inbox. It was from Claire. Daniel told me why he married me when he did. He says he loved me, but he also needed the loan. I don't know which part of my marriage was real. I read it twice. Then another message appeared from Meridian Legal. Final notice will be delivered to Hearthline tomorrow morning. The trouble Daniel and Claire had believed they could outrun had finally reached their door. And this time, I had done nothing to bring it there except tell the truth. Meridian's termination letter was 11 pages long. I never saw the full document, but the official summary became available after Hearthline disclosed the failed transaction. To its investors, Meridian had identified 4 unresolved risks: worker classification across multiple jurisdictions, material inconsistencies between compliance report versions, insufficient proof that Hearthline owned or had fully paid for certain operational frameworks, historical agreements signed or re-executed during the review period without adequate explanation. The letter did not accuse Hearthline of criminal conduct. It did not declare Daniel a fraud. It said Meridian could not proceed. That was enough. Whitmore Hospitality suspended further funding under the bridge loan agreement and initiated its own review. Claire was placed on administrative leave from the strategy committee because she had sponsored the investment. The loan was not called immediately. The board granted Hearthline 90 days to propose a restructuring plan. The state labor department opened an administrative inquiry after Theo and several other workers filed complaints. No one was arrested. No office was raided. Hearthline simply began losing the future it had promised creditors, employees, and itself. Daniel responded publicly at a startup conference. A reporter asked why the Meridian transaction had ended. Daniel said, "We became the target of an individual with personal motives and unusual access to the acquiring company." He did not name me. The implication was clear. By noon, the clip had circulated online. Leah called, "This is enough for a formal demand. Will it help? It creates a record and requires him to stop repeating the claim. Can we make him retract it? We can request clarification. Litigation would be expensive and could expose more private history." I watched the video again. Daniel looked tired but still charismatic. He spoke as if Hearthline had been attacked by an invisible force rather than reviewed by independent counsel. "Send the demand," I said. "No lawsuit unless he names me or repeats it." Leah paused. "That is a measured choice. I'm learning." That afternoon, Graham Ellis, Hearthline's board representative, requested a second mediation. This time the company was prepared to discuss payment and attribution. Before the session, Leah showed me a packet of communications produced under the preservation notice. One email stood out. Daniel had written it to Claire 2 months before their wedding. "Nora will never leave while the company needs her. Once the Whitmore commitment is signed, I can manage the transition. She'll be angry, but she always comes back when there is a real problem to solve." The sentence made my vision blur. Leah watched me. "This is relevant to timing and his intent regarding your continued services," she said. Below the email was another message, sent later that night. "Sometimes I think she loves being necessary more than she loves me." I read both. The first proved he intended to use my labor while preparing to leave me. The second revealed how he justified it. There was also a private message from Daniel to a friend, written after the cafe. "If Nora gets into Meridian, she'll spend the rest of her life trying to prove I was the reason she wasted her 20s. The message had little relevance to the ownership dispute, but it would have humiliated him in front of his board. "He accused me of revenge," I said. "Yes. This shows what he thought of me." "Yes. Can we use it?" Leah considered her answer. "We can include it if it supports a legal claim. Using it solely to damage his standing would complicate the mediation and weaken your position." I imagined Graham Ellis reading Daniel's words. I imagined Claire seeing them. I imagined the look on Daniel's face when the last people who still believed his version understood how deliberately he had planned my transition out of his personal life while keeping me inside the company. In my first life, I would have sent the email to everyone. I would have posted it publicly. I would have called the damage accountability. "What happens if we leave it out?" I asked. "We rely on the contracts, invoices, file records, and communications directly connected to the report. Are those enough?" "For your claims, yes." I closed the packet. "Leave it out." Leah studied me. "You're sure?" "No. That was the truth, but do it anyway." At the second mediation, Hearthline offered full payment of my overdue invoices, a licensing fee for continued use of the Redline matrix during restructuring, and a written acknowledgement that I created the original framework. In exchange, they wanted a release of commercial claims and confidentiality around specific internal records. Leah negotiated the language. I refused to waive my right to discuss general workplace experiences or cooperate with government inquiries. The final points remained unresolved, but we were close. During a break, Claire asked to see me. She looked thinner. Her blonde hair was tied back without styling. For the first time since childhood, she wore no makeup in public. "I'm leaving Daniel," she said. I did not pretend surprise. "Does he know?" "Yes." "What?" "Did he say that I'm abandoning him when he needs me most?" The familiarity of the phrase made us both laugh once without humor. Claire looked down at her hands. "I told him I couldn't tell which parts of our marriage were love and which were financing." "What did he say?" "That both could be real." "He's right." Her eyes lifted. "You agree with him?" "I think he loved you. I also think he needed your money." "How am I supposed to live with that?" "I don't know." She began walking slowly along the empty hallway. I followed. "I thought once we were married the guilt would stop," she said. "I thought the relationship would become legitimate enough to erase how it began." "It didn't." "No." She stopped near a window. "I keep remembering us at 17. I knew the memory before she described it. We had sat on the roof of my mother's garage with a notebook, writing plans for our lives. Claire would run a hotel that treated employees well. I would build systems for companies that did not exploit people. We would live within 10 minutes of each other. Our children would be friends. Daniel had not existed yet. Hearthline had not existed. We had loved each other before either of us knew how love could be used. Is there any chance for us? Claire asked. The question was too large for the hallway. I don't know. That means no. It means I don't know. She nodded, crying silently. I'm going to lose my position. Probably. My father says I embarrassed the family. You did make a serious business decision without adequate review. I know. You also don't deserve to be treated like a decorative failure for the rest of your life. She looked at me. How can you still say something kind? Because I don't need you to be entirely bad. Claire pressed her lips together. That's worse. Maybe. She wiped her face. I don't know who I am without Daniel or the Whitmore title. You'll have to find out. Is that what you did? I'm still doing it. When she left, I stood by the window for a long time. My phone displayed a message from Adrian. Marisol asked whether you'll attend tomorrow's project review. I said I would check. Nothing personal, nothing about the kiss. I typed 3 different responses and deleted them. Finally, I sent, yes, I'll be there. He replied, understood. The distance was exactly what I had demanded. I hated it. 2 days later, Hearthline's largest outside investor announced that Daniel would step back from day-to-day authority, while the board evaluated restructuring options. Claire moved into a furnished apartment owned by a family friend. Online, photographs of their wedding remained visible. Champagne, white flowers, Daniel's hand at Claire's waist. Their perfect life had lasted less than 4 months. Watching it collapse did not feel like winning. It felt like standing in the ruins of a house where I had once expected to live. Hearthline's restructuring plan arrived on the 83rd day. The company would sell several client contracts to a larger staffing provider, wind down operations in Oregon, and retain a smaller Washington unit long enough to resolve outstanding worker and vendor claims. Daniel would resign as chief executive. He would remain responsible for part of the company's personally guaranteed debt under a negotiated repayment schedule. Claire's guarantee would be addressed through the Whitmore board and the divorce process. The company would not disappear overnight. It would become smaller, less glamorous, and unable to preserve the story Daniel had told about himself. I expected satisfaction. What I felt was grief. Hearthline had not been entirely a lie. I remembered the first customer contract Daniel signed at our kitchen table. We had opened a bottle of cheap champagne and drunk it from coffee mugs because we owned no proper glasses. I remembered sleeping on the floor of the first office after a software migration failed. I remembered Daniel's face when the company placed 100 workers in a single weekend. And every one of them was paid correctly for years. I had believed acknowledging those memories would weaken my case against him. It did not. Good memories were not evidence of a good ending. The final mediation lasted 6 hours. Hearthline agreed to pay my overdue fees in installments, compensate me for unauthorized use of the unpaid work product, remove my name from the altered report, and issue a signed acknowledgement of my authorship of the original framework. The company did not admit fraud. I did not demand it. The settlement included a mutual non-disparagement clause and preserved my right to cooperate with workers, regulators, and lawful investigations. When the final language was ready, Leah slid the agreement toward me. Read every page. I trust you. That is not a reason to sign unread documents. I smiled faintly. Yes, counselor. I read all 28 pages, then I signed. There was no applause, no dramatic call from Daniel. Leah placed the agreement in a folder. You are finished with the commercial dispute. Almost. The payment schedule will require monitoring. I meant emotionally. That is outside my hourly rate. I laughed. She allowed herself a brief smile. Outside the mediation office, Daniel waited near the elevators. He wore an inexpensive gray suit I had never seen before. The watch he used to rub when nervous was gone. Can we talk? He asked. Leah looked at me. I nodded. She walked to the other end of the lobby but remained within sight. Daniel and I stood beside a row of empty chairs. I accepted a position at Northline Logistics, he said. What kind? Operations manager. The title would have once embarrassed him. It was stable, respectable work, but it did not contain the word founder. When do you start? Next month. And your mother? I moved her to a smaller facility near Everett. I'm sorry. She hates the room. I'm still sorry. He nodded. Claire filed for divorce. I know. She says I used her. Did you? Yes. The answer came without defense. I loved her, he continued. I also knew exactly what her family could do for Hearthline. Both can be true. That's what I told her. It probably didn't comfort her. No. The elevator doors opened and closed without either of us moving. Daniel looked at me. I received Leah's draft acknowledgement. It's accurate. It is, he swallowed. You built more of Hearthline than I admitted. Yes. I think I knew if I acknowledged it, I would have to admit the company wasn't mine alone. Yes. And then I might have had to give you the power to leave. I stared at him. You never needed power to keep me, I said. You had my trust. I know. He looked away. That was what I spent first. For a moment, I saw the man I had loved, not the founder, not the betrayer, just Daniel, exhausted and frightened, finally standing inside the consequences he had delayed. I'm sorry, he said. I believe you. His eyes filled. Can you forgive me? Maybe. Hope flickered. I stopped it gently. Forgiveness would not change what I choose. He nodded. I know. This time I thought he did. When I returned to Meridian, Marisol offered me leadership of the Fair Work Innovation Program. The initiative would help enterprise clients identify labor risks before growth transferred costs to workers. It will require public presentations, client resistance, and budget fights, she said. So you're making it sound attractive? I am making it accurate. The mechanical timer sat between us. Why me? I asked. Because you understand both operational pressure and its excuses. I accepted. Then I found Adrian. He was alone in a conference room reviewing a transaction schedule. Do you have a minute? He looked at the clock. I have 20. That sounds like Marisol. She has infected the department. I closed the door but remained standing. The Hearthline settlement is complete. I heard. I also accepted the Fair Work role. Congratulations. His tone was warm but restrained. I took a breath. I owe you an apology. You don't owe me anything. That sentence is sometimes a way to avoid receiving something uncomfortable. His eyebrows lifted. I continued. You were right that much of my life still revolved around Daniel. I treated not needing anyone as proof that I had grown. Adrian set down his pen. I was also unfair. How? I turned your healing into a standard you had to meet before I allowed myself to be vulnerable. You stopped because you had a boundary. Yes, but afterward, I used that boundary to retreat. Completely. I sat across from him. Why? He looked at the table. My father used to say relationships became dangerous when people expected you to choose them over your principles. I learned to leave before anyone could ask. I wasn't asking you to abandon a principle. No, you were asking me to tolerate uncertainty. And that frightened you. Yes. We sat with the admission. I don't want you to rescue me, I said. Good, I'm not qualified. I don't want to use you to prove anything. Also. Good. I would like to have dinner with you. His eyes met mine. We've had dinner. A real date. What qualifies it as real? We both admit why we're there. Adrian leaned back. And why would we be there? Because I like you. His mouth softened. I like you too. Friday. I have plans. Embarrassment rushed through me. Then he said, I can cancel them. You don't have to. I know. Friday night, we went to a small Italian restaurant in Fremont. We did not discuss Hearthline for the first hour. Adrian told me he had once planned to become an architect. I admitted I had failed my driving test twice because I argued with the examiner about an unclear instruction. He laughed hard enough that the table beside us looked over. After dinner, we walked beside the canal. I'm still afraid, I said. Of me? Of becoming dependent. Dependence is not automatically exploitation. I know that intellectually. What would help you know it otherwise? The question was careful, not what can I do to fix you. What do you need? I asked instead. Direct answers, space that is discussed rather than assumed, no tests. I test people. You create situations in which leaving becomes the easiest response, then observe whether they leave. I considered denying it. I'll work on that. I'll work on not leaving simply because a situation becomes complicated. We stopped beneath a street lamp. When he kissed me this time, neither of us was trying to escape another person. It was quieter than our first kiss. It meant more. The Fair Work Innovation Program began with 6 employees, 2 conference rooms, and a budget smaller than the catering allocation for Meridian's annual executive retreat. Marisol called that adequate conditions for proving whether an idea deserves more money. Theo joined as an external advisor. At his first meeting, he placed his old shift notebook on the table. Executives like dashboards, he said. Workers like knowing who pays when they get hurt. No one forgot him. After that, his shoulder had improved after the staffing agency that purchased part of Hearthline's business agreed to cover treatment while the classification dispute was reviewed. The state inquiry remained open, but several affected workers received negotiated payments. The process was imperfect. Some people accepted less than they wanted because they needed money immediately. Others gave up rather than continue through months of paperwork. Reality did not produce clean victories. Our program could not repair all of it. We could make future clients see the costs earlier. For the first time, my work did not exist to prevent Daniel's company from failing. It served people I might never meet. That difference changed how I slept. Adrian and I began spending weekends together. He did not leave a toothbrush at my apartment without asking. I did not interpret every quiet evening as evidence that he was losing interest. We were not effortlessly healed adults. We misunderstood each other. Once, he canceled dinner to handle an urgent transaction and failed to call until nearly midnight. I spent 3 hours convincing myself he had decided I was too complicated. When he arrived at my apartment, I almost told him to leave. Instead, I said, "I thought you were disappearing." He apologized without calling my fear irrational. Another time, I worked through a weekend despite promising to attend his friend's birthday. He told me he was disappointed. I did not explain that my work mattered more than social plans. I changed the schedule and attended late. Trust grew through ordinary corrections. Claire left Whitmore Hospitality in June. Her father offered her a ceremonial advisory role with no decision-making authority. She refused. Through a mutual acquaintance, I learned she had taken a project coordinator position at a community employment center south of Seattle. The salary was likely less than she once spent annually on clothing. I did not contact her. Her new life needed to belong to her, not become evidence in my story of forgiveness. Daniel began work at Northline Logistics. He sent the settlement payments on schedule. Once he emailed Leah to ask whether he could send me an update about his mother. Leah forwarded the request. I said yes. His message was brief. "Mom is adjusting to Everett. She joined a card group and complains that everyone cheats. She asked about you. I told her you were doing well. I hope that was all right." I replied it was. "Please tell her I remember her fondly." Nothing more. My mother and I took longer. Ruth visited my apartment one Sunday carrying a pie she had baked too long. We sat at the small kitchen table I had finally purchased. "I owe you an apology," she said. I waited. "When your father left, I made everything public. I told relatives, neighbors, his employer. I thought if enough people knew what he had done, he would be ashamed and come back. I didn't know that. I taught you a cleaner version because I was embarrassed." She folded her hands. "When you told me about Daniel, I wanted you to stay calm because I was afraid you would become who I was. So you kept asking me to protect him. I told myself I was protecting you from regret." The pattern was familiar, people deciding what pain I should avoid while ignoring the pain they created. "I needed you to believe me," I said. "I did believe you. You believed what happened. You didn't believe I knew what to do about it." Her eyes filled. "No." The honesty softened something. "I'm sorry," she said. "I wanted peace so badly that I asked you to carry all the conflict." I reached across the table. We did not erase the argument. We built something more honest around it. Adrian's father underwent heart surgery in July. Adrian had not seen him in nearly 3 years. "Are you going?" I asked. "I don't know. What do you want?" To avoid regretting either decision. "That may not be possible." He gave me a tired smile. "You've become less comforting. I work with Marisol." He went. He did not reconcile with his father in the dramatic sense. They spoke for 40 minutes before the surgery. His father did not apologize for delaying the plant shutdown. Adrian did not forgive him, but they agreed to speak again. "That sounds unfinished," I said when Adrian returned. "It is. Can you live with that?" "I'm learning." In September, Hearthline completed its operational shutdown. The remaining client contracts transferred to other providers. The company website displayed a short notice thanking workers and customers for 5 years. I read it once, then I closed the page. That evening, I felt restless. There was no next document to preserve, no mediation to prepare for, no rumor to correct or funding deadline to anticipate. I walked around my apartment opening cabinets and closing them. Adrian watched from the couch. "You don't know what to do when no one is attacking you," he said. "I have plenty to do." "You reorganized the spice drawer twice. The first system was inefficient." He held out a hand. I sat beside him. "What does life look like now?" I asked. "Tomorrow, we go to work." "That can't be all." "Next month, we take the trip to Vancouver. You keep delaying." "I wasn't delaying. You created 3 alternative project calendars to prove the trip was impossible." I leaned against his shoulder. "What about after that?" "We decide after that." The lack of a complete plan should have frightened me. It did slightly, but Adrian's hand was warm around mine. A week later, he gave me a key to his apartment. "This is not a request for you to move in," he said. "Good. It is also not a test." "Also good. You may use it when you want to be there." I turned the key over in my palm. "What do you expect in return?" direct communication if you no longer want it. That's all. That is not a small thing. I added the key to my ring. We discussed finances, privacy, work schedules, and the possibility of living together someday. The conversation was less romantic than a surprise proposal and more intimate than any promise Daniel had made me. Near the end of October, a package arrived without a return address. Inside was a blue notebook. I recognized it before. Touching it, the cover was decorated with fading silver stars. Claire and I had bought it when we were 17. On the first page in her handwriting were the words, "The lives we're going to build." We had filled 20 pages with plans, cities we might live in, jobs we would have, the kind of people we refused to marry. On the final written page, Claire had added a note in new ink. "I found this while moving. I don't know whether keeping it is cruel or throwing it away is worse. You should decide." I sat on the floor with the notebook in my lap. For years, I had imagined healing as freedom from grief. Instead, grief changed shape. It became something I could hold without obeying. I turned to the page where 17-year-old Claire had written, "Nora will run a company one day because she always knows how things should work." Beneath it, my younger self had written, "Claire will run a hotel where nobody is scared of the owner." Neither future had happened, not yet. I closed the notebook. Then I sent Claire a message. "I received it, thank you. I'm not ready to throw it away." Her reply came an hour later. Neither was I. 15 months after the morning in the cafe, Meridian approved permanent funding for the Fair Work Innovation Program. Marisol announced it during a Monday meeting. "The board has authorized a 3-year operating budget," she said. They also approved 14 additional positions. The room erupted. Theo slapped both hands against the table, then winced because his shoulder still objected to sudden movement. Marisol set her mechanical timer for 30 seconds. "You may celebrate until this rings." We laughed. When the timer sounded, she turned to me. "Nora will become program director effective next quarter." For a moment I could not respond. The title did not arrive because Daniel needed my skills or Claire had recommended me. I had earned it through work visible to people who knew how to name it. After the meeting, Adrian waited until everyone else left. "Director Bennett," he said. "That sounds strange. You'll become unbearable." "I already have." He kissed my forehead. That evening, another package waited outside my apartment. The return address belonged to Northline Logistics. Inside were 3 paper notebooks containing my original Hearthline planning notes. I had assumed they were lost. Daniel included a letter. It was 1 page. "Nora, I found these in a storage box from the first office. They belong to you. I used to tell people I built Hearthline because admitting how much you built made me feel smaller. The truth is that your ability never diminished mine. My shame did that. I loved you. I also treated your love like a resource that would renew no matter how much I used. By the time I understood the difference, there was nothing left to repair. I am not asking for an answer, Daniel." I sat on the floor with the letter in my hand. In my first life, I had wanted those words more than justice, more than money, more than my reputation. I wanted him to admit I had mattered. Now the admission arrived after. I no longer needed it to survive. I cried anyway. Not because I wanted him back, because the woman I had been deserved to hear it, and she never had. I placed the letter with the settlement documents. Then I called Claire. We had exchanged occasional messages since she returned the notebook. Nothing personal enough to be called friendship. When she answered, she sounded cautious. "Is everything okay? I think we should meet." We chose a bookstore cafe in Ballard. Claire arrived early. Her hair was shorter, cut just below her chin. She wore a simple navy sweater and carried a canvas bag printed with the Employment Center's logo. She looked like someone I might have met and liked under different circumstances. "How is the new position?" she asked. "Official next quarter." "Congratulations." "Thank you. How is the center?" She smiled faintly. "Chaotic. We have 3 printers and only one works when it rains." "In Seattle." "Exactly." We ordered coffee. For several minutes we discussed neutral things. Then Claire placed both hands around her cup. "The divorce is final, I heard." Daniel signed without contesting the personal property agreement. "How do you feel?" "Relieved." She thought for a moment. "And ashamed that I'm relieved." "You don't need to be. I left when he was losing everything. You left when you understood what the marriage contained." "He says he loved me." "I think he did." "I know." She looked out the window. "That almost makes it harder." "Yes, people preferred betrayal stories in which one person had never loved anyone. It made consequences easy. Daniel had loved both of us in different ways. He had also lied, manipulated, and taken what neither of us freely offered. Love was not a defense, it was part of the tragedy. Claire looked at me again. "I need to tell you something without asking you to make me feel better." "All right." "I envied you before Daniel." The confession did not surprise me, she continued. You knew how to do things, real things at family events. People complimented my dress. At work, they asked you questions. I envied you too. Her eyebrows rose. You could enter any room and assume you belonged. I was pretending. So was I. We both smiled briefly. Claire's eyes filled. I loved being your friend. I also hated how clearly I saw myself next to you. You could have told me. I didn't understand it. And Daniel. He made me feel like the person who could solve something. His mother needed care. Hearthline needed funding. He needed someone who believed in him. She looked down. I wanted to be necessary. The same wound again, different expression. I referred you to Meridian because I knew you were better than the life you had, she said. I also wanted you far enough away that I could take your place without seeing you. I know. I'm sorry. I know that too. She took a breath. Do you forgive me? I considered the question carefully. Yes. Her face crumpled with relief. Then I continued. But I don't trust you. The relief changed into pain. I understand. I don't know whether we will ever speak regularly. I don't know whether I could tell you something private without wondering what you might do with it. Claire nodded. I wish I could ask for a chance to prove I've changed. You can change without me watching. A tear slipped down her cheek. That sounds final. Some parts are. She looked at me for a long time. Can we ever be friends again? I remembered the blue notebook, the roof of my mother's garage, her hand in mine at her mother's funeral, the cream coat at the cafe, the document she had asked me to sign. I don't think we can be what we were. She lowered her eyes. But I don't want to pretend what we were meant nothing, I said. It mattered, you mattered. Claire began to cry in earnest. So did I. We stayed until our coffee became cold. When we stood to leave, she hesitated. Can I hug you? I nodded. Her arms closed around me. For 1 second, my body remembered 17 years of familiarity. Then we stepped apart. It was not a new beginning, it was an ending we had finally chosen. Honestly, outside, Claire walked toward the bus stop. I watched until she disappeared around the corner. Then I went home. Adrian was in my kitchen making pasta. He looked up when I entered. How was it? Sad. Do you want to talk? Not yet, he nodded. Do you want quiet? Yes. He turned down the music. No interrogation, no demand for reassurance. I took the blue notebook from my bag and placed it on the bookshelf beside Daniel's old planning notes. I did not burn either of them. The past did not become harmless when destroyed. It became manageable when it no longer controlled the room. 3 months later, Adrian and I married at the King County Courthouse. There were 8 guests. Ruth cried before the ceremony began. Marisol checked her watch twice and claimed she had another meeting, although she stayed for lunch. Theo wore a tie covered in tiny orange traffic cones. Adrian's father did not attend, but he sent a handwritten card. Claire did not come. I had not invited her. That hurt, and it was still the right choice. After the ceremony, Adrian and I walked along the waterfront beneath a pale winter sun. I wore a simple cream dress and low heels. He carried my coat because the afternoon was warmer than expected. Do you regret it? He asked. Marrying you? That would be an efficient first-day crisis. I laughed. What do you mean? Not stopping their wedding. I looked across the water. For a long time that question had haunted me. If I had exposed Daniel earlier, perhaps Claire would not have married him. If I had fought harder, perhaps Hearthline would have survived in another form. If I had stayed, perhaps Daniel's mother would not have needed to move. But I had lived the life in which I tried to stop everything. It had destroyed me without saving them. I regret that it happened, I said. I don't regret letting it happen without sacrificing myself to prevent it. Adrian took my hand. Do you miss them? Sometimes. The answer surprised neither of us. I miss who we were before fear turned all 3 of us into people who kept accounts of love. Daniel had needed admiration. Claire had needed to feel capable. I had needed to be indispensable. We had called those needs devotion until the cost became visible. Adrian and I reached the end of the pier. The city rose behind us, bright windows against the winter sky. What happens now? He asked. In the next hour. In general, I smiled. We go home. The answer was smaller than the futures Claire and I had written at 17. No grand company, no perfect marriage, no proof that every loss had served a higher purpose. Just a home where quiet was allowed, work that carried my own name. A man who stood beside me without asking me to disappear inside his needs. There were still regrets. Some mornings, I remembered the road from my first life and woke with the sensation of rain against a broken windshield. I never learned whether that death had truly happened or whether my mind had created it from fear. I stopped needing to know. That life had given me one useful truth. A second chance was not an opportunity to control every outcome. It was an opportunity to make a different choice. Adrian squeezed my hand. Ready? I looked once more at the water, then back toward the city. For the first time in either of my lives, I wasn't waiting to be chosen. I knew where I wanted to stay.